Damien Lovegas said he saw a man he had seen before crawling outside on the opposite side of the hospital building like a giant spider. He was so terrified by what he had seen that he was stuttering, which he had never done in his life. The doctors asked him to sketch what he saw through his eyes. When he drew his recent view on paper, the professional folks who study medicine were disturbed by what they had seen. He then expressed himself with 2 words: "It's real." The strangeness started 5 days ago in the hospital in Estonia. It's a mystery as to where the type of madness that was accurate many years ago had come from. Some exclaim that it is a type of drug that is spread to junkies who love to escape the real world by inserting drugs inside them. Those who consider themselves investigators, even if they do not have any degree of any kind, theorize that they are to blame for experimental tasks by the government. Whichever was the reason for the unexplained illness, it was never recorded on any type of document. On the first day, a patient who was pronounced deceased screamed from her room, crawled to the hallway, and began to attack those who were around. Security had arrived on time and had no choice but to shoot the zombie-like patient in the head. The unconscious and unresponsive ones, those who were in a vegetative state, the doctors and nurses couldn't help but notice loud, ear-piercing screams coming from their rooms. No one had noticed the evil that was living within the hospital until the 3rd day came around. The 2nd floor, with patients who suffered from disabilities that prevented them from either walking or speaking, began to scream and crawl like spiders. When the doctors and nurses tried to pin them down, they fought back with force. The patients' mouths were no longer normal, human teeth, but replaced with razor-sharp jaws. Federal authorities spread the word that it was best to evacuate all medical professionals and to go with the plan of burning the building down, for no one knew the reason for the patients becoming savage. Emily Flores was on the 1st floor in the playroom when the hospital went on lockdown. She hated being with the others on the 2nd floor. It only reminded her of what was wrong with her. The ability for her to walk on her own was not an option for her. A car accident occurred when she was 12. The lower part of her spine was damaged in the crash, and it left her the only option of moving around in a wheelchair. From the doctor's point of view, it was a miracle that she had survived. For Emily, it was hell. Emily also suffered not just from her legs, but from the mind as well. She set her wheelchair next to the window of the playroom, reading a scary book. She then stared out the window and viewed a gray, cloudy sky as memories began to shoot back to her mind. Memories about the twisted-looking being she called the Dead Man. A monstrous-looking thing her sick mind had developed when she was a little girl. The 16-year-old girl was not new to her imagination playing tricks with her head. However, she hadn't had a recent encounter since she was 13, a year after the accident. She remembered how the Dead Man would slam both of his hands on her bedroom door, how he would crawl on the ceiling, hissing down at where she slept, how he looked badly burnt and wore a ripped army uniform. She recalled how he would land on his knees next to her and whisper in her ear, "Emily, Emily." She recalled how he would put his face against hers and pretend to be asleep, not wanting to face the monster in front of her. She then exited the playroom and found not only the hallway pitch black, but what looked like the entire hospital. She then locked eyes to her left and stared at the darkness at something that called for her in a whisper, "Emily." She remembers whose voice it was. The 16-year-old girl's heart began to pump. Pump, 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 pump. She turned to the other direction of the hallway and tried to make it to the exit as fast as she could. As she did, she heard her childhood monster coming up from behind her. "Emily!" She had never heard the Dead Man shout at her. She began to panic more, to the point where tears began streaming down her face. She was close to the door when something pushed her off her chair. She had fallen to the floor on her face. A hand turned her over and roared at her face. It was the Dead Man, Emily. She screamed and kicked to survive, but out of nowhere the lights appeared, and surrounding her were doctors and nurses wanting to calm her down. Emily was sent to a room on the 4th floor. A room where it was quiet, and there is where she met Damien Lovegas for the first time, where he was kept in a straitjacket. Emily was given medication to keep her calm and conscious. She lay in a bed next to Damien. Damien kept to himself and faced straight toward the wall, to where there was nothing for him to look at. Then the young girl saw something dripping from the ceiling down to her plain white blanket. It was red and wet. Her heart then began to pump like crazy. She slowly looked up, and on the ceiling was the Dead Man himself, gazing at the 2 patients. He then hissed, "Emily. Damien." Damien then opened his mouth to speak, and his words had sent horror through Emily's mind, heart, and soul. As she heard more screaming coming from the hallway outside her room, he said, "Can you see him too?"